Well, hello. I'm glad you're back for part 2. Remember, this was a lighthouse. And a shelter is a basic human need. It protects us from bad weather, keeps us out of the sun, and it protects us from extreme cold. Shelter provides safety from dangerous animals and enemies. We eat, sleep, raise children, and keep our belongings in shelters. Shelters are homes. People build shelters everywhere, in the desert, in the city, even on the water. The types of shelter people build depends on their surroundings, the available buildings, materials, and their way of life. Some people live on houseboats. Who knew? See? Houseboats. It says a lighthouse make navigation safer and easier in harbors and ports. Without these powerful beacons and their sound of their foghorns when it's too foggy to see, sea captains traveling at night or in storms might not be aware of dangerous rocks or shallow waters. In Alexandria, Egypt, a giant stone lighthouse 40 stories high was built in 280 BC. It guided ships for 1,000 years and was known as one of the 7 wonders of the world. A houseboat is a shelter on water. Houseboats are one way to find shelter in overcrowded cities, so they can live on the water. And some people in big cities live in tall buildings. And those tall buildings are called skyscrapers. They don't, well, I guess technically they do scrape the sky, but it doesn't hurt the sky, obviously. It can be a clay hut or an adobe. These are some Native American structures. And the desert is very dry and windy. For most of the year, it is very hot during the day and cold at night. Shelters in the desert need thick walls to keep out the heat during the day and keep people warm at night. Clay huts called hogans have only one room with a hole in the roof to let out smoke from the fire used for cooking and heating. The Navajo Native Americans who live in the Southwest use logs to build a circular frame and then cover it with a thick layer of clay which bakes hard in the sun. This material is called adobe. This one is an adobe. This one. And log cabins. Another kind of shelter in the country is the log cabin. They're built from trees. German and Swedish settlers introduced this kind of home to the U.S. and became very popular in the West because it was easy to build and the materials were easy to find. The settlers chopped down trees, put the logs one on top of another, and used grass or mud to fill in the holes between the logs. For a long time or a short time, most people lived in solid shelters or brick, wood, stone, or steel, which stand for many, many years. But some people are nomads. They travel around from place to place and live in tents, mobile homes, or houseboats. Other people leave their permanent homes for part of the year and use temporary shelters. The Inuits of the frozen Arctic region used to live in temporary shelters called igloos. When they were hunting in the winter, an Inuit could build an igloo for overnight shelter in an hour. That's pretty cool. Farmhouse. Today, most people live in or around cities, but for thousands of years, many people lived in the country. Farmhouses and homes in places where people raise animals and grow crops. Crops are like corn and okra and watermelon and honeydew melon and all kinds of things you can eat off of a plant. Those are crops in the field. They are made of wood or stone, those farmhouses. Often have several separate buildings with different functions. Animals live in the barn, and grain is stored in a silo. So let's see if we can find those. Show you those. Here's the farmhouse. And here's the log cabin. That log cabin is in the snow. We had snow where I live. We didn't get a lot of snow, and then we got sleet. And sleet is an icy rain. So I was glad I had shelter to keep me from the bad elements outside, because it's cold and my steps were icy, and that can be dangerous. So I was in here. I was in a house staying warm. I hope you're staying warm. But some people, like they were talking about in this book, are nomads, or they're people that don't have homes and shelters of their own. And sometimes they travel with tents, and they stay outside in these tents. And when it's icy and snowy, it can be dangerous. The temperatures can drop really low. And so we don't want them to get frostbite or hurt their fingers from the cold. And so we hope that everybody has a nice shelter to stay warm during this snow day. So that was our story, second part and end of shelters. And so I hope you enjoyed those stories with Miss Gina. And you're at GinasPlanit. And I want you to grow your